Welcome to People Love Process. Math is an absolute. Art and design, not so much. So when you use digital tools, you have to remember you're working with a computer based on math. And when you use the alignment tools in Illustrator, you don't always want to accept the results they produce. In this movie, I want to showcase how you can handle different alignment challenges in your designs based off of good optics, not merely mathematical algorithms. Now, this movie was inspired by a question I received from one of my channel members, so let's jump into it. Lots of things to cover. So if we take a look at this design, we can select the brand mark here, this symbiotic relationship between a rhino and a bird. I thought that went really well with Better Together. Ultimately, the client never went with this direction, but we're going to select the mark, the logo type, and the byline, and we're going to make sure that we have our document clicked on in terms of what we want it to align to, and now we can center align all of these elements. Now, if I deselect, does this look bad? Well, no. Is it mathematically perfect? Yes. If I select this and I select this, this is mathematically perfect, meaning from the left edge of the rhino's bottom leg to the side, that distance is exactly the same from the tip of the tail to the right side. So yes, it's mathematically perfect, but does this make for the best alignment? Is it optically constructed well? And I'd argue no. So we're going to go and select the rectangle tool. I'll just go down to graphic style here, and we're going to snap. And I have smart guides turned on. Command U to toggle them on and off. I use them all the time, but I toggle them on and off. If I'm doing vector building and it's an elegant shape with the pen tool, I tend to toggle it off. When I'm doing more geometric stuff like this, it's on. So we're going to create this rectangle. I'll direct select these, snap it to the opposite side. So this represents the base, the weight of this design. Now his tail is just this little part that pokes out. So it's actually visually or optically leaving a gap about the same distance from the edge of the right side of his tail to the edge of his back leg. But this rectangle represents the base strength of this brand mark. And if I select that, select the logo type and focus by holding Option down on the logo type and center it, notice that this rectangle is going to shift to the right because that weight is better centered there. Now, this does not have a tail, so it's not doing the same thing with the mark, but I think this looks better, so I would move it and position it over, and I think this is now optically centered and works better. Now, anytime I'm working like this, I'll also go in, select everything, and just group it. That way it stays in the proper location. So, mathematical alignment opposed to optical alignment. Optical should win out every time. It doesn't matter if the math isn't perfect. It's what it looks like, and if it looks better, that's what you want to go with. That's the rule of design. Whatever works better and looks better should be the one that wins out when it's all said and done. Unfortunately, in today's world, that's not always the case. Here's another design. This for an executive assistant company. They call executive assistants kangaroo stars. So the name of this client was Kangaroo Star. This is one of the explorations I did with this kind of thick line kangaroo. But again, if I select the brand mark, select the logo type, focus on the logo type, and center alignment, this is where it says the perfect mathematical alignment is on this. Now, obviously, I wouldn't want them floating above the type this far, so I'd bring them down, but I think we can improve on this. We have a lot of dead space to the right because his tail goes out to that degree. So we're going to zoom in a little bit because I pay attention to certain details, actually. If you look at the K, the width of those lines are pretty close, and the line weights of the typeface, and the reason why I picked this typeface is it goes with the line work of the brand mark really well. But I like paying attention to details. So we're going to select this graphic style down here, and with Smart Guides, I'm going to snap on this anchor, and I'm just going to draw this shape. Now, why am I doing that? Because I'm going to take this brand mark, I'm going to select the bottom edge of the foot, bring it down until it snaps to the top of the, let's drag that away, drag it back down until it snaps to the top of the A. Then I'll select the bottom of the kangaroo, and I'm going to drag it up until it snaps to the top edge here. Why am I doing that? It establishes that same tolerance of negative space between my type and the negative space I have going on here in the foot and the top here with his arms. Now I'm going to slide this over on this one until we get this edge snapping right to that box. This is a throwaway shape. Now, I did that because it works really well. One, it's balanced now. We have the same negative gap in between the logo type and the brand mark, but notice it kind of, if we zoom out, it visually flows from the G into the brand mark. And even though it's positioned further to the right than what the mathematics say, optically, this works a lot better. So if I select this and the logo type and we show what was it with mathematically centered, this is what it would be. But I think if we Command Z undo that, I think this looks better. When it's all said and done, of course, I'd group it. So optical alignment, you want to pay attention to these details to improve the readability and the relationship between elements in your design. Let's take a look at another one. If I just select these two and we go center, this is what the mathematical algorithms say is the perfect location, but it really, really isn't. You want to optically find that sweet spot. So if I select this brand mark and move it over, I think that sweet spot's going to be probably right around there. I think that looks a lot more balanced than this does. So you want to pay attention to those details. And in this case, we're not moving it over too far. We're just moving it over enough so it balances well. Let's take a look at another one, which I distinctly call balanced alignment, because this brand mark itself kind of has, it's not a balanced shape. It's not a circle. It's not a square. We have a leg of the star that we're playing off of in this brand mark that missing in the bottom left. So we have this quadrant of our design motif that's just negative space. So if I select this, select the logo type, focus on the logo type, and use the alignment tool to center it, this is what the math says. The far left of the star to the edge of the bounding box is the same from the far right of the star to the edge of the bounding box. So mathematically, it's perfect. But if I bring this down and put it here, does this look bad? No, I wouldn't say it looks bad. I just think it can look a whole lot better if we rethink how we align it. And so if I take the mark and I just move it down, I think aligning it so it's right about there optically looks way, way better and makes the overall design stronger. And again, I would just group these like this. If we look at the entire brand system for this design, you have the top one we initially did, but on a horizontal version, which might work better on a website, for an example, we tuck it into that negative space since we have that space available. And then on a little banner that this client would want to do, it is optically centered, mathematically centered by the alignment tool on this shape, but I moved it up so it's kind of floating above the logo type. And in this context, I think it works. So it's a balance of the context you're using it in and the relationship between the elements that make up the design. But finding that sweet spot in every context is what your goal should be as a designer to balance the overall alignment. Here's a brand exploration I did for Allstate. This is their logo type and their byline. This is one of the brand marks we developed. And if I just take this and I bring it up over here to the right, select this type, focus on the typography, the logo type, and I go horizontal alignment, this is where the math says it's perfectly balanced. I don't think this is actually the best location for it. I think this mark almost looks like it's falling down too far, like it's just going to go whoop and just fall off the design. So what I want to do is I want to improve this balance, and I think we can easily do that by just bringing it up a bit like this and probably moving it over a little bit as well. So this is how I'd balance that design. So it's just paying attention to those details and not gravitating towards the easy way out. Okay, Illustrator lined it for me, my job's done. Well, it really isn't. You really need to pay attention to those details to get that design perfected. In the context of this design, we did a lot of their whole brand concept is "You're in good hands with Allstate" is the theme, and they had us do all kinds of hand explorations. These are just some of the ones that me and Savannah worked on. When it was all said and done, they just stayed with what they had for years, and they're still using it. So that's the way it goes when you do exploratory work. So if you need a pair of good hands, give me a call. Let's take a look at another one. This would be a good example of horizontal alignment. This brand mark for a skincare brand. If I take this and I move it into the position where I think it'll look well like this, select the type, focus on the type, and go alignment. This is the mathematical alignment. Well, this, much like the Allstate, just looks like it's going to go drip and just fall down and fall away. This just does not visually work. So what I do in this context is if I can play off alignment within the logo type, I almost always do that. In this case, I created this starting with a circular shape to get the final brand mark here. So if I go to the anchor point that makes up that initial circle right here, and this is why you want to have smart guides, because it will tell you when you're over an anchor point, when you're over a path. Once again, when you're over an anchor point, a little easier to see than on the blue. But if I select this anchor point and I snap it to an anchor point in the same orientation on the O, and then I just drag it over and stop where I think a good balance between the negative and positive space like that. I think this is a lot better in terms of balancing this mark in a horizontal alignment. Now, if we look at the brand system, you see the one we just aligned, you see the stack. This is a pretty easy one to figure out. And Nourish, when we stack the letters in sized up skincare, this one, there is nothing in the logo type itself we can align with. But if we turn on these alignment guides, this is what I paid attention to in all of these. So it's not always going to be perfect using the features in Illustrator. So you really have to pay attention and figure out what's going to work best. So let's take a look at another one. This was a fun project I worked on earlier this year for a tattoo company in Europe. I believe they're in France, I want to say. And it was called Bad Baboon Tattoo Studio. And now some of you might go, well, that's not a baboon, that's a mandrill. Well, yes, we know that, but that's ultimately what they wanted. So I think it's super fun, and it turned out really fun. So we're going to take this logo type, which is centric. We have the studio name under it's called Bad Baboon Tattoo Studio, but we focused on Bad Baboon. If I say that too fast, that's a tongue twister. If I select the mark we created, which is a bad baboon. I'm not going to say that too fast because I keep wanting to mess it up. This is going to perfectly align. That's fine. We're going to just go with the alignment it gives us because it works. You know, if we had something that was kind of off in a negative space, we might adjust it. But in this case, this one's pretty simple. Now, when it comes to doing a horizontal, I'm always thinking a context of usage, example on a website, etc. This is where I'll go up, and if I have to, I'll zoom in like this, and I'll take this type, and I think it'd make more sense to snap the top edge of this type to the top edge of, I don't know, his cheek, whatever, and just bring it over and find a nice gap between the brand mark and the type. and I think that's going to work good. I'd select both and go group. So that's how I had alignment with an element in the brand mark itself. Now, ultimately, when this was all said and done, here's all the elements of the brand system we created. We did a seal for them, just the mark itself. We did black and white, and we did reverse versions that work on a colored or colorized or dark background. So all these things I keep in mind as I'm designing and creating and working out alignment. Let's take a look at another one, which I call associative alignment. Again, if we take this brand mark and I select it and select the logo type, focus on the logo type that's stacked here, and I go horizontally aligned, this is where the math says is the perfect location. But I really don't think it is. I think we can improve on this by improving the alignment. So if I go here and I select this anchor and I bring it over and snap it to the bottom edge of the E in this case, and then slide it back in position, I think this looks a lot better because visually your eye goes right in and it creates this nice foundation for the logo type. And again, I would group it. So it's those little things that I pay attention to, and I think every designer needs to pay attention to the details, even if your clients don't. And making those changes, whether or not your client requests it or not, you should be doing it because you get in the good habit of training your eye to see those things, and you'll never look at something the same again. So it really does help to work it out. Here's a couple marks I did. One was for an African-American tour company called Our Stories and the Foundation of America. And this was the mark I created for them. This was for Nurse Navigator, a program for coordinating and scheduling nurses to work. And if we turn on the associative alignment guides here, you can see in the Our Story tours, I took each word and it aligned with the top, kind of the top edge of each of these symbols, carrying it over. And the same thing on the brand mark for Nurse Navigator, the crossbar on the lighthouse brand mark kind of goes over and creates the top edge of the typography. So those are things I pay attention to a lot. Now, this applies to every kind of design, whether you're doing a branding, like I've shown you already, or in this case, a t-shirt. And I create a line of New York-centric designs for one of my clients called Street to Street. They put on these basketball camps for inner city youth. It's a really cool organization, a nonprofit. And so I've been working with them for years, but they wanted a New York-centric set of designs. And so I created this linear artwork of the Statue of Liberty, the city line, and also worked out this logo type. So all we're going to do is select our design, select the focus on it, have our type selected, and we're going to center it in the middle. And then I'm just going to bring it down and try to figure out a good location to position it, because this is just a two-color design. Once I get it in a position, this is where I'll just go ahead and increase it. And what I do here, it's a combination of alignment and making sure we're not creating a lot of visual tension. What do I mean by visual tension? Well, let's go ahead and zoom in. I'll show you a few cases of visual tension here. This edge of the N is really close to this edge of this building, and that's causing tension. This angle of the Y is almost at the same angle as the robe of Lady Liberty. So those are the things I think we can improve on. So this is where I'll go back in and I'll decide maybe we make this a little larger like that. And even though it's perfectly mathematically centered, does it need to be? Well, I would argue no. So we would move this over. And I think when you break those rules, and you can see here, no visual tension here, it overlaps enough. If you have it too close to another edge, your eye tends to go there. But if you commit and overlap it, in this case, we're actually moving it further to the right than the alignment says is the perfect alignment. But I think optically speaking, this looks a lot better and is going to work better. Now, I even look at this and I see the top edge and I'm going, there's a little tension there. So I might go back, grab it, and I might move it down. Something like that, I think, would work better. So there's a lot of artistic license when it comes to balancing a composition, specifically if you have a design motif and typography like this to work it out. But I think this is going to work great for just a 2-color t-shirt design for this organization. So let's continue. Improving optics. Now, this is common with typography. If you look at any typeface and you look at the letter forms, whether it's the letter O or a letter G or a letter C, and you compare it with the other letter forms, if it's, let's say it's a capitalized typeface like we have in Open Soul Arts here, the letter forms like O are always higher than the letter forms that are like E. It goes just barely higher. Why is that? Because it'll look smaller if you don't. And if we look at these two designs, we have this brand mark here, logo type, and we look at this one, they're the exact same height. And that's making this look just a little bit smaller. So this is where I would go in on this and I would just scale this up just a little bit, just so it's a little bit higher than the other one, like that. And I think this balances better. It's that minutia of detail you kind of need to pay attention to. Now, the next thing I want to show you is a plugin. Now, I realize some of you don't have Astute Graphics plugins, but this one's really cool. Now, if you pay attention as you're building and realize certain things before you get too far in the creative process, you won't even need a plugin for this. So we created this elliptical shape, this circle down here. And whenever you create a shape like this, let's go and go over here. Notice there's a center node that you can snap to. Now, once you do other things, let's say you create another copy of this, Command-C, Command-F, and you go like this, and it's sitting on top of the other one, so you select it, and let's see, you go to Pathfinder, and you go minus front. Notice you automatically lose, even when you have it selected, you lose that snappability on the center. There is nothing there to snap to. So as long as you're aware that when you initially create a shape, this is the moment you want to do certain type of alignment. In this case, we want to have a star in the middle of this. And if we grab the star tool and we go to the center, notice it says you're on the center. We can go ahead and create a shape like this, you know, and it will center perfectly within that shape. Now, I just wanted to show you that because if you know you're going to do this, you need to realize if you make any edits on this elliptical shape, that center orientation that you can snap to won't be there, and it'll make it really hard to deal with. So let's go ahead and I just wanted to show you that to kind of preface what I'm going to show you now. Now, if I take this design, I go, okay, I have this circular shape done. I have this design. Well, I'm going to move this over and we're going to select the circle and I'm going to center it. We'll center it vertically. We'll center it horizontally. And now mathematically speaking, it's perfect. Well, it's not perfect. The math says it's perfect, but it's not. So so how do you solve this problem? Well, there's a few things you can do. Well, the one thing you can do is you can use a plugin. If you know up front you're going to be doing this, then do what I showed you initially. That'd be one way. But the second way is to use a plugin. The plugin I use from Astute Graphics is called Subscribe, and it has a tool called Circle by Points tool. You know, an engineer named it that. But here's the way it works. If I go to this graphic of the star and I go click a second one, drag to the third one, it's created this circle. Let's just go ahead and color it a magenta outline and we'll just scale it up. So it's now centered perfectly. We can select both of these, group just temporarily, select this circle, focus on this circle, and align both horizontally, vertically. Now it's perfectly centered. We can delete this circle. We can select these two and group it. We can turn on our logo type, select this, align it to this. It's centered. and then we can position it where we want. So that's how you can use that Astute Graphics plugin to do that. So, but just keep in mind, if you're going to base something on a circle and you want it to align to the center of that circle, whatever shape you're going to be using with it, just make sure before you edit anything in the circle, or keep a copy of that initial elliptical shape, and then you can snap to the middle. So a lot of people get further down the line and then create more hassle later on. That's how you can avoid it. Now, when it comes to live type and alignment, I obviously will search out typography. So on this design, I wanted to call it Wild Rage. And so I've typed out this font. And what I want to do is, at times, I'll do this where I'll go in here and you can add a space. So some people want the type on both sides. So you could do it like this and figure out where you want it. But I just think once I find a font, I just think it's easier to go ahead and create outlines from that font like that. We'll select the Wild. We know it's aligned now horizontally. And we'll go ahead and we'll go Unite. I'll sample the black, make sure it's the same color. We'll select this. We'll go Unite, sample the black. And so this is where I usually pull away from whatever I want to line it to, and then I bring it back, and I probably put it right about there. And then on this one, I probably balance that one out right about there. And that's how I would align this. The more I'm looking at this, the more I might nudge this over a bit there, like that, to balance out a design like that. So not a big one, but once again, pay attention to the details. Now, I want to show you something else, because there is a feature. It's been added to Illustrator. They even consulted me on it in terms of adding a feature like this, and it sounded like a great idea. I just don't like how they implemented it. So first, I want to show you how I do it old school, that I've done it for years before they even had snap to glyphs, which is the feature I want to show you. So this is an Adobe font here by a brilliant designer by the name of Ryan Hughes out of UK. Check out his fonts on Adobe Fonts. They're awesome. He's one of the most talented designers I've ever seen. But I'm going to select this, and I usually make a clone, Command-C, Command-F. Then I'll go up to type, and I'll go to create outlines. I actually don't do that. I never go up here. I actually have what's called a Stream Deck by Elgato that has buttons on it that I've programmed, and I just hit one of those buttons and it outlines type. Once again, it's like keyboard shortcuts, but I ran out of F keys on my keyboard. Now I have a lot of them on my Elgato Stream Deck. Which is super awesome. I got that for Christmas a couple of years ago, and I use it all the time. Now so why'd I do that? Because I want access to this, so I can take an elliptical shape, like we'll take a square up here. I'll go to styles. I'll use that style. I'll snap to the top of the T, and I'll snap to the bottom of the N like that. That gives me this. So if I select it, my control panel will tell me what my height is. The vertical is 160. The height is 131.8228. And by the way, if you don't have your control panel turned on, super, super helpful. Just go to Windows, make sure that's on, because it shows you information. We're going to grab this brand mark for Technopus. And all I want to do is I want to snap to the top edge of each tentacle here, and we'll do the bottom edge here like that. I'm just doing that to establish the vertical height. I'll select it, and I'm going to mask it temporarily. Select this that's determined the height that we want it to balance with, which is this number. So I'll copy this from my control panel. Go to this. This shows me a vertical height here, and I'm just going to go ahead and paste that number into here so it gives me the same height. I'll cut it out from that now, like that. We can get rid of the box. We don't need that. That was just to mask it temporarily. I'll snap it to the top of the T, and I'll move it over like this. And I might even get rid of this if I'm not completely sure if I want to use this typography. In this case, I do. But that's how I get that type of alignment that's associated with the letter forms, and I would just use that tactic. Now, can you do it in another way now? Well, yes, this is the old school method, and I showed you how I did it there. Let's go ahead and turn this off, turn this one on, but there's caveats with this, and I don't have any of the things needed turned on because I feel they kind of get in the way, and this is where Adobe kind of falls short at times. They come up with some good ideas, but when they execute them, the way they kind of work them out isn't as intuitive as you would think it should be. And this would be one of them. So the first thing you have to do is you're going to have to go to View, and you're going to have to make sure you have your Snap to Glyph selected. So that's the first thing we're going to do. You also want to go to View, and you want to have Smart Guides turned on. We already have that turned on. So those are the first two things you need to make sure of. Now, this feature, Snap to Glyph, won't work if in the view you have Snap to Grid on. It overrides it. So you want to make sure this is off. We have it off. That's good. And also in the preferences, we have to go to Illustrator Preferences, and under Smart Guide, we'll open that off. There's a few things here that you need to make sure that are turned on. You want to make sure that Align to Guides is disabled. So you want to have this disabled. And then you want to make sure snapping tolerance is not set to 0. I'm sorry, you want alignment guides to be on. My bad. I meant turn those on, and you don't want 0 here. It needs to be, you can put any number just other than 0, and it's going to work. With those things changed, we're going to go back here, and if I click on this, we're going to go to, let's see, we'll go to type. Go back to, I should have probably wrote this down, and I didn't. Okay, we'll go in here. We're going to right click. We're going to go Snap to Glyph like this. And so you can see it's done it to the N here. And so this is the part where if you have something, let's say we'll just do a square for no better reason, and you have this, let's say it's colored this kind of orange color. Now with the N established as Snap to Glyph, we can go up here and it will snap to this letter form. So if you want to adjust it, it'll snap to that. But that's how you have to, I thought, well, it'd just work on all the letter forms at the same time. Well, it doesn't. You'd have to go in, if you're hovering over this N letter, by the way, and this is another part that's not super intuitive. If you right click and you go release Snap to Glyph, you'll turn it off. Let's say you want it to be the T in this case. If you go over here and hover over that and go Snap to Glyph, now the T is. If you go to the N and you go Snap to Glyph, it'll just focus on one letter at a time. And that's the unfortunate part. In this case, we could get away with just doing the T. So if we go up here, we'd still have to go and kind of create a temporary mask just because this is the only part of the area I want it to pay attention to. And I can mask that still. And now with this mask, I can go down here and I can snap it to the live font based off of Snap to Glyph like that. Then I can hover over the T, release the Snap to Glyph like this, select this, cut contents, get rid of that like this, and then adjust it and position it wherever I want. So that's that feature. And I'll be honest with you, it's okay. It's just not as helpful as I thought it would be, because I thought you would just select your whole word and turn it on, And then you could just snap to whatever parts you want. And then when you're done, you could turn it off or something like that. But no, they focused it on each letter. Maybe I'm missing something. Maybe, well, before we do, let's hold Option down. Sometimes as you have, nope, that that didn't do it. That moved my window. So anyway, it's a feature. It's there. Do I find it super helpful? Not really, but you might like it. I just don't. I can do it a lot faster, doing it the old school way. So that tends to be what I do. If I've been doing it for years, it's just faster for me to do that rather than try to use a feature they, once again, kind of half-baked and didn't really fully realize it in a way that's super intuitive, in my opinion. So computers are great. I love digital workflows. I'd never want to go back to the days of traditional methods for design and layout, like stat cameras and paste-up boards. But when it comes down to design, you can't let a machine, or a functionality in this case, steer the graphic ship. You have to override tool-driven methodology and improve a design's composition using a designer's eye to really find the optical sweet spot or position that works the best for your design. Because ultimately a computer tool is only as smart as the one using it. If you have an idea for a future People of Process movie, use the email in the description below and share it with me. It can be something practical like alignment, like this movie was, or it could be something more creative. Let your imagination run wild, but I love hearing your ideas and I always consider them. So the exercise files for each of my People of Process movies can always be accessed via a link in the description below. Purchasing access to the source files or becoming a channel member helps me to continue making content for this channel, and I appreciate your support. I really do. It helps a ton. Until next time, thank you for watching People of Process, and as always, I hope this content will help you improve your own creative process.